Alrighty. I'm beveling some more leather feathers. So I'm going to freehand bevel this at 30 degrees. So I'm going to freehand it until I get to the fence, until I get to the thickness where the fence is. This is veg tan cowhide that I'm beveling, and it's a tapered strip. So I'm in the process of getting to that point where the fence is going to. Alrighty. A little bit further, and now we're getting pressure and drag because we're hitting the fence. And then I'm going to open the fence and I'm going to use the fence. Alrighty. And then we're going to close the fence as we're going and watch the offcut. You you don't want to be resizing it when you're beveling if what your goal is to just bevel the edge. And that's kind of the trick. I can freehand this with a credit card and a razor blade, and I'm happy to do that. But So the hard part here is the taper changes is to have the offcut be consistent. And you can freehand this by keeping it in contact and changing the angle of attack. And then you can see how the bevel, as the taper changes, the bevel stays consistent. This is a ½ inch up here. It goes down to roughly an eighth. So you can use a lot of different blades in this combination beveler. This is a number 11 scalpel blade. Thinner blades tend to work a little better in this tool. It was meant or designed to use the Schick single edge razor blades or Parker blades. And once you engage the fence, then you can bump the fence back to match as the taper changes. So you can see that this changed for the offcut and got stiffer. And that's where you make the change. Because you don't want to quite cut through the skin side. Because then you're changing the taper. And each time I hit the wheel, it's moving at about a 64th of an inch. then we're going to tighten the fence as we go the other direction. So about every 6 inches it moves about a 64th of an inch. So, oops. So the tip of the blade sheared off just a touch. So time to move the blade up. And then you can be really precise. Mostly I'm just trying to put in a 30-degree bevel that's all the way down. One of the problems is the more you work with leather, the more you realize that it stretches and moves and has a mind of its own when you're beveling. And especially if you're beveling something tapered. We're getting down to about a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters. And at that point, I typically will change the attack angle and just freehand the rest of the strip. Mostly because it's faster. So this goes from about 1/8 of an inch and pretty much smoothly tapers to about a 1/2 an inch. Hello, Macarella Alonso, and another one I can't translate. I'm just putting a 30-degree bevel on some veg tan tapered strips. Basically, every time it's engaging the fence, the friction changes, so it'll bump the fence back a 64th of an inch, a very small amount. And pushing it that way, this roller that way, narrows the fence towards the blade. And the most important thing is keeping the tension between the two hands and the pressure down on the barrel of the tool. See if I can get it a little closer. This is just a number 11 scalpel blade. But as the tapered strip goes down, once you get down to a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters roughly, I use the back edge of this fence and I change the angle by pulling the strand forward and watch the offcut. And I change the angle of attack and stop using the fence as I go real narrow. And it just is a little bit faster than trying to adjust the fence all the time. And you don't need fancy tools to do this. You can use a hotel room card or a credit card and a Stanley blade or a scalpel or a hobby blade like an X-Acto. This is like 1/8 of an inch, and you can see it. The taper smoothly go up, and it's all beveled smoothly at 30 degrees. So these are tapered strips for braiding around a tapered shape. In this case, for a 3-foot snake whip. Once you start engaging the fence and the friction goes up, then you can open the fence as you go. But mostly you watch the offcut, and if the offcut gets too stiff as the taper goes up, it means you're resizing instead of beveling. Now you'll see me kick the wheel counterclockwise, and that will tighten the fence. Now, this is not a locked fence. It just touched lightly to keep it against the rail, but I haven't locked to the fence. If you're doing fixed, even, consistent width lace, you can lock this, but and when you see the offcut dancing and it's chattering, back it up and take any chaff out. If that doesn't help, it's because the front of the blade, in this case, it's got a wire edge and it's not sharp in that little area where it's cutting through. It's starting to chatter, and we don't want it chattering. And the width changes on this taper about every 6 inches. And then once you get down to 1/4 of an inch, you can change the angle of the tack and just watch the offcut. And you can pin it to the washer and use the back corner back here and pull diagonally between those points and freehand it. And then you can see it goes from 1/8 of an inch and goes slowly gets wider, but you can see the 30-degree bevel is pretty consistent all the way up to about 1/2 an inch, about 16 millimeters wide. I can't type. Hello, Waldweld. Hi. All right, now we're starting to engage the fence. So we're hitting the fence, open it up a little bit. And this is more of an art than a science. You just kind of watch it and feel when to hit the wheel. close the fence a little bit as we go the other direction. And then the next step is I'll dye the leather. And I'll put some beef tallow and beeswax mix and rub it in to replace the moisture loss from dyeing. Everybody uses a different thing. Anyway, I've been streaming some of this to show how I go about beveling tapered strips because people are interested sometimes. Sometimes I can show you easier than trying to explain it in words. And you can learn it better watching somebody physically do it. Make sure the bevel is consistent all the way down. There's a lot of feel and tension and getting all the tension right. And I'm waiting for this to engage the fence. We're just starting to rub the fence now. And then you can also tell that you hit the top surface of the leather. So you open the fence up. There's lots of ways to do everything. It's just, this is how I go about it. And I usually don't have anybody come set and watch or hang out. So I get to set in solitude and work on the leather. Uh-oh. And I'm just freehanding the rest of this. Mostly because it goes faster. And you can do the same thing with a nail as a reference. And you can tap a blade into a 2x4 and you can bevel it in a similar manner. Just chunk of wood and a nail. But this thing has micro adjustments which lets you do refined work. Although more than half of refined work is figuring out how skillfully and how consistently you can keep tension as you roll things. Because you can always sweep away from the blade. You probably shouldn't sweep towards the blade. I'm just working down to 1/4 of an inch here until it starts engaging the fence. Then I have to open the fence, which is this direction. And then you just watch the offcut. Adjust it so you're just trimming it and not resizing it. And this is all veg tan cowhide. And then goes from 1/8 of an inch that's been beveled at 30 degrees all the way up to about 1/2 inch. And then as you start engaging the fence, because your width is getting wide enough, you can then use the fence to make your adjustments. So right there, we're getting more friction now, and we can open the fence. Because I'm trying to keep the dimensional taper as best I can on these. And again, it's an art, not a science. You don't have to be exact, but the closer you can get to perfect with the string, the prettier the outcome will be, and the better the taper will follow the taper of the core. So now I'm going to use the back corner of this fence and adjust forward to maintain the bevel angle. And you just watch the offcut, and much like using a sewing machine, you can move slightly in more or out more on the fence and the attack angle to adjust the angle on it. And you can check to make sure it's all beveled and that the bevels look mostly even. Oops. It's a reason you use the tool. And you always cut extra feathers, as some will come out imperfect. So this one's imperfect, but in this case, I may still be able to use it because I don't need this full long thing, but I'm setting it in a different pile because that one isn't a perfect one. Then I need to start opening the fence as I go. Yeah, my hands are pretty beat up, but I'm always breaking my nails off. And I'd rather work than be bored. I don't do well with boredom. And handling veg tan will chew on your hands as well, especially when you're trying to keep it and drag it and keep it under tension, and you're constantly running it through your fingers. So I'm running this freehand until it starts engaging this fence, and then I'm opening it. Then I can use the fence to moderate the amount I'm trimming off. Every 6 inches it changes by about a 64th. It's kind of like a stepped pyramid. It's not a completely smooth taper, but it's pretty darn close. Then I'm going to start squishing it as I go the other direction. We're down back to a 1/4 inch or so. So I'm just going to freehand this and ignore the fence. And it goes from 1/8. And this is beveled at 30 degrees. This, by the way, is about 3.5, 4 ounce veg tan cowhide. Yeah. Yeah, if you do this for a couple hours a day. Right now we're at about an hour. I've been doing this for an hour and I'm a little more than halfway through this group of feathers. Hi there to Pierre Bontham. I appreciate you guys. I cut 17 of these feathers because I need 16 to make 2 signal webs that are 3 foot long. And the feathers are longer than they need to be. I tapered them down more refined than they need to be. And the more you freehand stuff, the main thing you cannot do is you don't want to penetrate the top surface when you're going this direction because it'll just bite in and cut the strand in half. So you have to let it swell towards the fence. It's kind of crazy, you know. And yes, my thumb is right on the edge of that blade, but I've got a hand shape so that there's no way it will get pulled into the blade. But you'll still find the blade with your fingers, especially if you work with open blades. And we're going to open it as we go and start using the fence as a guide. So this blade is starting to make this offcut chatter, which tells you the blade is getting dull. Sometimes you can back it up like that and it'll cut smoother because it's just got a little ball of leather skiff. And then moving this fence that way brings the fence closer to the blade. You see how much sharper the blade is here. So I probably shouldn't use it so much. Hi. Hi, all y'all that chose to join me this wonderful day. I'm beveling some tapered feathers, tapered leather strips to make a tapered whip. I always appreciate people checking in and watching. I would rather sit and make things. Once you get down to about 1/4 of an inch, then I tend to freehand and use the back edge of this fence and change the attack angle on the blade, which allows me to go through the rest of this without adjusting the fence. And I just watch the offcut and adjust where the engagement of the blade is compared to the strand. It goes a lot faster. It's also more dangerous. Not for your fingers, but you could cut through this string because it's 1/8 of an inch. And the beveling and the taper. Now this is about 6 feet long, 5 feet long. But you can check your work by running it through your fingers. And then the trick here is you don't ever want to cut through the top side because then you're rebeveling, or not rebeveling, but you're resizing that strip. You want to keep the strip, but you have to really watch the offcut and watch it dance so that you're just on the edge of the top layer of the skin side of the leather. And then you want the rest of that strand to drift into the fence. Once it starts rubbing the fence, then you can adjust that fence. And right there, the friction changed. The thickness of this offcut changed by 1/10 of a millimeter, not much. And then we're opening the fence a little bit. whenever it skips off, you can back it up and cant the attack angle a little bit until it engages the fence again. And you're going to play with it as you go, you know. And the more perfect your string is, the more perfect your whip when you get done will be, if that's what you're braiding. But when you have long tapered strips, you can go over a tapered round object with braiding. But as you play with it, and the material has quite a bit of, or a little bit of stretch in it. It's less stretchy than chrome. This is veg tan cowhide. So it's 3.5 ounce cowhide, 4 ounce cowhide. So it's been trimmed down to be thinner. And then I'm just changing the attack angle as I go and trying to maintain the offcut so that it's consistent. That's a 1/8 of an inch. You just kind of check to see how consistent the taper and the bevel is. It's a 30-degree bevel. And this is step 2. I mean, step 1, you cut the bevel shapes, or cut the tapered strips. And the critical part with this is you have to keep the speed and the tension consistent as you're beveling, and then you're trying to get the edge of the blade to be at the bottom of the skin side. And you just watch the bevel. You watch to see how much of the skin side you're taking off because you don't want to change the taper of the overall strip. Not at this stage. You can always go back and adjust it as you're braiding a whip, but I'm going to open it. By changing your attack angle of the leather, the approach angle of the leather to the edge of the cutting edge of the tool, the knife blade in this case, you can guide how much you're cutting off. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to use all sorts of tools. This is just how I go about it because it's faster and more consistent for me. And at the end of the day, if I can get done faster and more accurately both at the same time, it's kind of a good thing. You can see the feathers and the bevels. So it's a 30-degree bevel on a strip that tapers fairly smoothly from half an inch down to 15 millimeters down to 2 or 3 millimeters. And I'm down to the last 3 feathers, and then I'll be done. So right at about an hour and a half of work. And there's not a lot more blade here, but I can get a little bit more blade. And I'm beveling the flesh side. And the trick here is you have to let the strand, as it gets wider, walk in while still cutting the same amount off of the tapered side until it engages the fence. Then I'm going to move the fence tighter, and I'll keep kicking the fence tighter as I need to as I walk down the other direction. The main thing is keeping the tension even and pulling about 15 or 16 pounds on this strip of leather, which keeps it stretched, helps the blade glide through it. And I'm guiding it. I've got the fence there as a backstop, but I'm adjusting the attack angle because it's faster than trying to adjust the fence every second. It's safer to do it as to freehand on the way down a strip because you're not getting wider material. So you can see goes from a couple millimeters, and it tapers on the 1/2 inch. All right, I'm down to my last strip. We cut 17 strips. Should always cut an extra tapered strip or two. I tend to ruin one and 17, or have one imperfect out of 17. Once in a while, I'll screw up a couple over the work. But as I hit an hour and a half of doing this, I have to think about taking a break and trying to balance the tension and the offcut and the width and walking it over to engage the fence and of course the blade is starting to chatter. And ready. Then and having it a sharp blade is nice because it cuts smoother. So move your blade often. You don't have to change it often, but you have to move it so that the surface that's cutting through the skin side is nice and sharp. Okay, now we're down to about a quarter of an inch, a little wider than a quarter of an inch. I'm going to start freehanding the other 3 feet. So this is the consistency of the bevel on the strips that you can get when you take the time to work on it like this. So 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 there's the 17 strips. So you can take a scalpel handle like this. You can take one of these strips like so, and you can cut a slit like that. You can take another one, and then you can pull one through the other. And you can bleed knot or square knot these two strips together. That lets you see how consistent you can have the tapers run through your fingers for width. But that's how you attach the feathers together. So you end up with 4 strips that are knotted in the center. Yeah, I have ugly hands. I beat them up. They get torn up, and the veg tan steals the moisture out of my hands for sure. I'm not ever going to be a hand model. And yes, I put some lotion on them. On days when I'm braiding, I get a lot of tallow into my hands. But I've been doing this for a week solid, so my hands are torn up. And this is all leather dye that has gotten through the glove and gotten hold of my fingers. So, but if you like this type of content, keep me in mind. Add a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff. Thank you guys very much for watching me set and bevel leather. I had to do it anyway, but I try and share how I go about things. You can get it. You can see this is the waste off of the. This is actually from about 32 strips. You end up with a bird's nest of veg tan. Thank you for watching. Chuck with Pocket Snakes out.